In June 2020, one morning, one of Germany's most praised companies confessed to something that seemed impossible. It had 1.9 billion euros that were supposed to be sitting safely in bank accounts. It had been audited. It had been documented. It was trusted. But the money had not been delayed. It had not been frozen. It had not been hidden. In reality, that money did not exist. And before long, the world would learn an even darker truth. That money may never have existed from the very beginning. This is the story of Wirecard. The story of 1.9 billion euros that never existed. Enjoy watching. Germany had built its reputation on discipline, precision, and trust. Its companies were expected to be solid. Its regulators were expected to be careful. Its auditors were expected to be respected. Its financial system was expected to be reliable. And for years, Wirecard was presented as proof that Germany could produce a global technology giant, the payment company of the future, a major success story on the stock market, Europe's answer to PayPal and Visa. But behind the glass offices, investor presentations, and confident speeches, something was wrong. This case became one of the biggest accounting scandals in modern German history, a fraud that deceived banks, regulators, auditors, investors, and almost an entire country. But it was also the story of a journalist who saw it before almost everyone else. Wirecard had started as a small payment company in Munich. At first, it was not glamorous. It processed payments for online gambling sites, adult content platforms, and high-risk internet businesses that traditional banks avoided. It was useful, it was profitable, but it was not yet a national symbol. Then the story slowly began to change. As digital payments grew, Wirecard positioned itself as the company that understood the future before everyone else. Smartphones, online shopping, contactless payments, and global e-commerce. Wirecard told investors that it was right at the center of a financial revolution, and investors believed it. By 2018, Wirecard had become one of Germany's most valuable financial companies. It was worth more than Deutsche Bank. It was worth more than Commerzbank. And it had been added to Germany's most prestigious stock index, the DAX. At that moment, Wirecard stopped looking like a risky fintech company. It began to look like a national success story. At the center of this story was Markus Braun. He wore black turtlenecks, spoke in a calm and technical language, and presented himself as a European version of Steve Jobs. He talked about disruptive innovation. He talked about technology. He talked about building the financial infrastructure of tomorrow. Banks lent Wirecard billions of euros. Investors defended the company. Politicians celebrated it. Germany wanted Wirecard to be real. But there was one problem. The profits were not what they seemed. And the growth story that made Wirecard famous was built on a shadow system that almost no one truly understood. The fraud was complex enough to confuse people, but simple enough to operate for years. Wirecard claimed that it processed payments in countries where it did not always have the necessary licenses, so it said it used local partners. These partners were called third-party acquirers. In theory, these partners carried out payment processing on Wirecard's behalf in regions such as Asia and the Middle East. And according to Wirecard, these partners generated massive revenues. Revenues that explained the company's explosive growth. But there was another detail. Wirecard claimed that large amounts of money coming from these partners were being held in escrow accounts, safe accounts, protected accounts, verified accounts. The total amount was 1.9 billion euros. The money was said to be held in 2 banks in the Philippines. On paper, everything looked real. There were documents, there were letters, there were confirmations, there were audited files. But when the truth came out, the bank said something devastating. They had no relationship with Wirecard. The accounts did not exist. The money was not there. The 1.9 billion euros had not disappeared from the system. That money had never been inside the system at all. For years, EY, one of the world's most respected auditing firms, had approved Wirecard's accounts. Every year, Wirecard received the credibility it needed. But the most basic question was never properly answered. Was the cash really there? The scandal was not only that Wirecard lied. The real scandal was that so many institutions accepted the lie because the paperwork looked convincing. And in the world of finance, sometimes paper can become more powerful than reality, until reality finally comes knocking at the door. While Germany was celebrating Wirecard, one journalist continued asking uncomfortable questions. His name was Jan Marsalek. He worked for the Financial Times, and he noticed that Wirecard's numbers did not behave like the numbers of a normal company. His questions were simple. Where was the revenue really coming from? Who were these Asian partners? Why was it so difficult to verify the profits? And why did Wirecard become so aggressive whenever someone questioned it? Instead of giving clear answers, Wirecard went on the counterattack. The company accused critics of trying to destroy its stock. It claimed that journalists were working with short-selling investors. It used lawyers, public relations pressure, and private investigators. The message was clear: stop asking questions. But the most shocking part was not Wirecard's reaction. The truly shocking part was the reaction of the system around it. German regulators did not immediately target Wirecard. Instead, they investigated journalists and short sellers. In 2019, Germany's financial regulator, BaFin, banned short selling in Wirecard shares. This decision effectively protected the company from some of its loudest critics. Marsalek continued publishing for years. Wirecard denied everything for years. The stock continued rising for years. And for years, many people chose not to believe the journalist, because the story he was telling was too uncomfortable. If he was right, Germany's Fintech champion was a fraud. And if Wirecard was a fraud, then auditors, regulators, banks, and investors had all failed at the same time. Sometimes, the truth is not rejected because it is weak. Sometimes, the truth is rejected because accepting it would destroy too many reputations. Then came Thursday, June 18, 2020. Wirecard announced that it could not locate 1.9 billion euros. The money was supposed to be in bank accounts in the Philippines, but the bank said those accounts did not exist. For the first time in years, EY refused to approve Wirecard's annual report. The stock collapsed. Within days, billions of euros in market value disappeared. The company that once looked like the future of European finance was suddenly fighting for survival. Markus Braun resigned. Soon after, he was arrested. But another name became even more mysterious: Jan Marsalek, Wirecard's chief operating officer, the man who ran much of the company's international operations. When the scandal broke, Marsalek disappeared. Reports wrote that he followed a route through Belarus. Later, investigators and journalists linked him to Russia and possible intelligence circles. Even today, his disappearance remains one of the darkest parts of the Wirecard story. The company collapsed. The money was gone. The man who may have known the most had vanished. And Europe began asking how such a massive fraud had managed to survive for so long. Wirecard did not only expose one fake company, it exposed an entire system that failed to ask the right questions. Auditors trusted documents instead of verifying the truth. Regulators targeted critics instead of confronting the company. Banks lent billions of euros without understanding the risk. Investors defended the story because the story was profitable. And politicians wanted Wirecard to be a national success. That is what made the scandal so powerful. Wirecard did not fool people only with fake numbers. It fooled them with a story they wanted to believe. A German technology giant, a European champion, a company that could compete with Silicon Valley, a future that seemed too important to doubt. This is exactly where fraud becomes dangerous, because fraud rarely survives on lies alone. It survives on hope, on pride, on greed, on silence. The question is not only how one company lied. The real question is why so many powerful people chose to believe it. Wirecard filed for insolvency in June 2020. It had billions of euros in debt. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. Investors lost money they may never recover. Markus Braun later went on trial in Munich. Jan Marsalek remained a fugitive. EY faced legal pressure, sanctions, and a major reputational crisis. BaFin, the regulator that had once protected Wirecard from short sellers, was forced to undergo reform. And what about Jan Marsalek? The journalist Wirecard tried to discredit turned out to be right. The man they tried to destroy had seen the truth before almost everyone else. The money had never been there. But perhaps the most disturbing question is not about Wirecard. Maybe the real question is this: what else does not really exist right now? Which company, which balance sheet, Which success story is being protected because too many people need it to be real? And who is being punished for asking that question? Because in the world of finance, the biggest shadows are not always where the money disappears. Sometimes they are where everyone agrees not to look. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Wirecard deceived banks, auditors, regulators, and investors for years. Do you think a fraud of this size could happen again today? Write your answer in the comments. If this story opened your eyes, share it with someone who still believes that financial markets are always transparent. And subscribe to the Financial Shadows, because the most important stories in the world of finance are often the stories that no one wants you to see. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. Always do your own research before making any financial decision.